I'll look at using a new technique to us of achieving a similar outcome to what we've seen so far. The outcome I'm talking about is getting the black and white filter to fade over time so that we gradually desaturate its effect. We do this by employing two video tracks, one a duplicate of the other, and using what are known as keyframes or key points to stipulate where we would like a key moment to occur, hence the term keyframes. Our key moments here will only be 2, but the principle remains the same, even if you use 3, 4, 5, 10 or whatever. Anyway, let's look at what we have set up here. Here are our 2 clips on different video tracks. I say different clips, they're the same, one's a duplicate of the other. At present we can see this clip on video track 1 because it's visible, but the track 2 video is deactivated. Therefore we see the colour version of the clip within the program monitor. And if I select it, you'll see there are no effects integrated. By contrast, selecting the video track 2 clip shows the black and white filter is being employed. We can't see it though because, as said, our track output button is toggled off. I'll click to toggle it on. OK, we now see the same scene in black and white. Right, let's go about fading the output from black and white into colour. I need to go to my Effect Controls panel once my clip 2 on track 2 there is selected. And just to make this clearer, I'm going to resize the Effect Controls panel by left-clicking and dragging to the right to enlarge it. And now we see a timeline view of this clip only, with the relevant horizontal time ruler above. You can place your CTI along the duration up here, but of course it's all in black and white throughout its length. No matter where we place the CTI along its duration, of course it's going to be in black and white. Also notice that where you place the CTI is also reflected on the main timeline down here. Now, to use keyframes to create a fade, we need to initially create points at which are key to our fade. And we add keyframes by clicking this small diamond button. This is the button to add or remove keyframes. Now at present the CTI is at the start and is displaying this clip at 100% opacity with its black and white filter employed. I'll click to add my first keyframe here, and you'll notice now that we see a small diamond keyframe added to the timeline here. This sets the opacity at 100% at this point. Now I'll just move my CTI along the timeline a little to around about 8 seconds in, or alternatively you can move your CTI down here in the sequence panel timeline too. I'll move to closer to the end at near enough to 10 seconds along. Once I add another keyframe here in a moment, I can reduce the opacity of this clip at this 10-second position, so that upon playback at this point, the clip will be invisible if I set the opacity to 0%. And the fact the movement from the start keyframe to here is gradual will mean the fade from black and white to colour will be gradual. The colour will seem to emerge through. So I'll come back up here and click to add the second keyframe at this point. OK, there's our second keyframe added, and you can also see it clearly on the opacity line down in the sequence panel. Now, one way of reducing the opacity, as we've seen before in other tutorials, is to left-click and drag down on the timeline down here to see it register, in this case at the moment at 29%, pretty much quarter visibility. Alternatively, left-click and drag this scrubby version up here where the number is, left-click, and then drag from 29% to 0%, and that will mean full invisibility for this black and white version of the clip. Now you might have noticed I've just accidentally hit the Add Keyframe diamond. Well, there's no need to panic, I can remove this in a second. Before I do, note that you can use the opacity slider here to reset to a different percentage value. OK, now I'll leave it at 0% now. And now let's remove the extra keyframe added by mistake. In the Effect Controls panel, you can use your horizontal zoom slider to zoom in, and now we see both keyframes at the end. And because we've zoomed right in, they are further apart. Relatively anyway. Their position stays exactly where they were. Zooming in like this of course means they appear to be further apart, but the distance between them is actually the same, regardless of whether we are zoomed in or zoomed out. Which means now I can select the one I don't want and click once more on this keyframe diamond to remove it. So that's what that keyframe button is. You can either add, if there is no keyframe there, and if you do have a keyframe, well, by selecting it, then by clicking on here once more, we'll remove it. It doesn't mute it, it removes it. By the way, these arrows either side of the keyframe diamond means you can jump backwards or forward to the next keyframe, like this. So with this one selected now, I'll reduce the opacity from 28% right down to 0%. Now I'm just going to refocus my screen a little, just to save you some time. Okay, and now I'll manually move my CTI by clicking across this timeline up here, so that we can see the fade from black and white to colour. There's a little bit of colour emerging here, and a little bit more over here, until we get to the end, of course, when all the colour from the original clip on video track 1 will be showing through, because we will have reduced the opacity for video track 2 down to 0%, hence making it invisible. Let's have a look at this in action. I'll move my CTI to the start, so let's watch it live. I'll hit play. Okay, so that's what we can do with keyframes then, when we want to overcome problems, in our example here, of moving from a black and white filter into colour. Of course, this isn't the only reason why we would use keyframes, and we are going to explore keyframes further as we progress.